Welcome to the Mipcom wrap session. For those of you who haven't been before, the format, the idea of this session is to resume the key trends that have happened at Mipcom and Mip Junior this year. To go over those trends, first of all, I'm James Martin. I'm MIP Market Social Media Manager, and I'll be moderating this panel, which we've chosen for their obviously they're all industry experts. They all represent different parts of the industry, and their brief has been to come along to this session to speak objectively, i.e. they're not allowed to plug anything. They're not going to. The idea is to talk about trends and give you, so that you can take away the key trends of the market when you go back home. So, to introduce the panel, to my right here is Traci Paige Johnson. Traci is the creator of Blue's Clues, a kids TV show, and more recently she has become the founder of Yummico, which makes kids apps. So she'll be talking about the sort of the key kids trends, the kids TV trends that she's seen here this week. Then next along is Marianne Halford, who is the Managing Director of FTI Consulting. Marianne advises TV companies on how to improve their performance and their digital integration, and she was formerly working for Fox. Next along is Louisa Heinrich, who is the founder of Superhuman Limited. She is a strategy consultant and is formerly of Fjord and the BBC. And last but by no means least is Angela Natividad, who I've had the pleasure of working with all week doing the live coverage of Mipcom for MIPBlog. So she's been live blogging all sorts of sessions and soaking up all manner of industry knowledge that she'll be able to tell us about. So what we like to do at this session is to ask everyone to come along with one image of the industry trend that they think sums up what's happened here the most accurately. But before we do that, I thought we'd just quickly go around and ask how is your market, Traci?
Exploding. Just it's insane. I'm actually a Mipcom virgin. This is my first time here as a content creator, and just the amount of information, not only on the content but the devices. So the market is growing strong, and it's insane.
But I'm sorry, I meant from a personal point of view first, before we get on to our themes. You've never been before.
Yes.
Was it just, were you blown away?
Yes, absolutely. Just at the amount of smart people and the excitement of the change in the digital space and what it's bringing in the creativity. Absolutely.
Okay. Marianne, how did you find it from a personal point of view?
Personally, I found it exhilarating, energizing, enlightening. I'm going to try to see if I can come up with a few more E words. It was fun. I had a great time and got to connect with a lot of colleagues, clients, hopefully new clients, and others. But there's a lot of change going on in the business, and people are excited about the change. So that was great.
That's another E.
Oh, good. Excited. Yes.
Edifying.
How was it for you?
I'll give you another E word: encouraging.
Okay, good.
Yeah, so I had a great show. Lots of really good conversations and finding like-minded or like-interested people in some places where I didn't think I was going to find them. I see lots more opportunities, lots more really openness to collaboration across different segments of the industry, I suppose, than I have before, which is always nice.
Okay, Angela?
Well, Marianne bogarted all of the good adjectives. But yeah, I would pile on to that. The energy is definitely different this market, and like you were saying earlier, it's dramatically different from in April, actually. People are looking at things in a way that's a lot more opportunistic and a lot more in a way that's a lot more excited about what's going to happen in the future. There's definitely the sense that that TV's best is ahead of it, and that was definitely something that you didn't really feel definitively before.
Great, thank you. So let's get on to everyone's images. Traci, you chose this picture to sum up.
Again, as my first time here, just to see all of the creativity out there, just the amount of shows, and having to, even me with my pedigree of the bar has been raised of how to get yourself noticed above the fray. So just the explosion of content, but there's the explosion of devices of where kids can get their content, because now it's not only TV, but on iPad and iPhone and the computer and YouTube. It's just, and working with these digital natives where they're just take it more instinctively than I've ever been used to. It's just been such a challenge. I did notice some trends. I have specific trends, some overall trends, and then how to succeed in the marketplace, because we did sign a deal, though I can't say, but it's very exciting. Specific trends, a lot of space, a lot of planes, a lot of origami paper is big.
Origami is big.
Yeah, like a lot of textures and folding paper. There was Zach and Quack. With Zodiac, a lot of visual of that, of paper. Comedy, funny is money. A lot of shows, even if they're action-adventure or drama, they need a lot of comedy in it and just more funny. And then with the preschool set, that young, the trend has swung from younger to much older. So instead of 2 to 5, of 3 being the base, a lot of companies want that 5 to 7, a little bit older, shooting older. And then overall trends of the development process has completely changed with all this digital. So there's a lot of testing the marketplace with apps first and using digital first to get a sense of your characters and stories, and doing development deals with pilots on digital-based, on apps. And what's different as well is that you get the audience response. So like with Amazon, of doing a pilot with Amazon, just putting a rough animatic on there and having the audience able to, tell you what you think immediately, just like being seen in your underwear. It's very like, ah. But it's good, but it's scary, and this is all new, and you just got to jump in. So then also the explosion of where you can put your content. So with, as I mentioned, Amazon, and now there's all these subscription models on the iPad that came about, I learned today while at Mipcom, Hopster and Battery Pop, which are going to be kid networks that are going to run on the iPad and showing original content. And then I found still the same stories in the marketplace of how to be successful. You have to be an entrepreneur now, and hence why this is my first time here at Mipcom. I mean, I've been creating children's programs for 20 years, but now with the advent of the iPad and all this new energy of feeling like I got to put myself out there now and meet these people and inspire them and show them what I'm about.
A bit like a startup in a way.
Yeah, totally a startup. Absolutely. You have to offer more in the show. So even if you have great stories and straight characters, you have to think digitally in your digital platform of how you're going to be using your stories and characters in iPhone and in social media and all those aspects. And then lastly, though, what is comforting is that content still is king. So even with all of this technical stuff that's going on, if you don't have great characters and stories, you won't survive. So you got to connect with the kids still.
So the challenge is connecting with these digital natives, because they're not just because from a kids' TV point of view, but because we've got to keep engaging them with them as they grow older. I noticed a good quote, which was that there seems to be agreement that it's first screen, second screen doesn't really matter to kids. They don't care if they're watching on an iPad or on a TV.
Right.
Or does that make things more difficult for you?
Well, it just is. It makes it exciting, but I think for educational, because my expertise is educational television, the idea that the more you can interact, it more cements the learning. So the idea of second screen is very exciting because it can enhance the learning. It just it's a lot of choices, which is hard, and creating content of trying to figure out, does it make sense? Are you working with the technical first, or are you working with the content first? And not just doing something because it's cool, but because it's going to resonate with kids more. It's tricky.
But what's encouraging is, like you said, if you make an app off your own back, the app does well. That's an argument.
I can own the IP, and then I have a stronger stance when I'm going to the bigger network guys rather than having to go to the big network guys first.
Exactly. Fantastic. So business models are changing. There's a lot of disruption, another buzzword. That's something that you wanted to talk about, Marianne, I think. Let's have a look at your...
Absolutely.
So your example is, this was the thing that I would say was the biggest buzz of Mipcom, if you take this example. Could you tell us a bit about it?
Well, unfortunately, I didn't get to go hear Jeffrey Katzenberg yesterday, but thank you, MIP, because I know I can watch the interview online, and I will. But I did read all the coverage on it, and I thought the headline and then the details that I read about it were very interesting, because it really emboldens or encompasses a lot of the conversation and chatter I heard amongst a number of professionals and business colleagues here at the market, whether or not it was talking to studio executives or talking to small independent producers or producers themselves or format style companies. Everybody is beginning to look at bold and new and different ways to package and sell content. And I thought that Jeffrey Katzenberg boldly saying yesterday that he would have paid or he did actually offer $75 million to the producers of Breaking Bad to create 3 additional hours, all of which would be packaged in 6-minute segments that people could subscribe to.
On their mobiles, that was on their mobiles.
On their mobile phones,
but that was
yes,
the key
exactly.
condition.
Right, and obviously, I think he was also announcing to the world a model that he's also building for Awesomeness TV, which is going to be servicing younger audiences. I think it tells you that people are very much thinking outside the box. And why are they thinking outside the box? Because the consumer is now consuming content in many different ways. The consumer isn't necessarily just watching on a television screen at 8 o'clock on Thursday night, which was always the big moment for U.S. broadcasters. Like, how can you get a slot on Thursday night so you could get all the valuable advertising before the weekend on Thursday evening? I mean, people today are consuming content here. They're consuming it on laptops. They're consuming it on their mobile phones. They're using Roku boxes and other things. They're not watching television at appointed times. So I think the people that own content know that they have to think differently about how they sell that content. Now, obviously, the studios are pulling a lot of punches in terms of how they wind up packaging their deals. That won't stop. But in many cases, the studios are also thinking more innovatively, because they know that they need to be relevant in those markets that they are servicing, and they have to help the providers of content in those markets be able to offer accommodation to their audiences. I also think that people who are creating content, I spent some time with several people that are big producers of content, and they are developing formats or shows here in Europe, and they're getting traction for it, but then they think about how they're going to do it in the United States, and then they're saying, well, I don't necessarily have to sell to networks anymore. Well, I can also talk to Netflix, and I can talk to Amazon. So they're getting competitive bids between Netflix, Amazon, and U.S. networks at the same time. So the playing field is also changing as a result of this, and there are more revenue streams happening. So I'm not saying that I think that there are any sort of set business models for how deals are going to be done going forward, but I think the barn is open now in terms of really thinking in many different ways, and I think you're going to see more dynamic deal making being done. I also think you're going to start seeing people doing shorter term deals, because deals have to be in a short term, because you don't know what is going to be the new incumbent in technology or the new behavior patterns that are going to happen going forward. So I hope if there are any broadcasters here, they haven't signed 5-year deals with any studios. That's my hope.
So the rule book is being rewritten. What doesn't really seem to matter is that the creators of Breaking Bad, they said no, thank you.
Excuse me?
The creators of Breaking Bad, they said no.
Yes.
Even though Katzenberg said that it would have been more profitable for them than the whole 5 seasons of Breaking Bad, just that deal. They said no, but it doesn't seem to matter. What seemed to matter for him was that he had made the proposal, and that's why...
Right. And listen, it was a brilliant move on the part of one of the smartest people in show business. I mean, he spent a lot of money buying Awesomeness TV, which builds and creates short-form entertainment content for young people. And he basically was testing out whether or not that model resonated with people. And it certainly did. It grabbed a lot of headlines. And I think it's paving the way for how he's going to think about packaging Awesomeness TV. It's also leaving a lot of people here scratching their heads thinking about, this could be another way to look at packaging my own business model. Perhaps if you have a known star, you could perhaps do these sort of things to advance a show or build an audience, or in between seasons. Perhaps you can now start thinking about, once people get sort of, when a certain show goes off the air, I miss it. Okay, so I've watched my 13 episodes, and then I have to wait until next year to see what happens on Boardwalk Empire or something like that. My goodness, I mean, if Boardwalk Empire could have little vignettes about Nookie Thompson that I could maybe buy for 6 minutes. I'm not saying that HBO is going to do that, but I'm just saying I go through consumer withdrawal if something is missing. So I think he just opened up a lot of people's minds yesterday to how to think differently about producing and delivering and distributing content.
But there have always been, there have been webisodes or spin-off series that's been going for a while. Is the difference here just the sheer amount of money that he was willing to put on the table, or is there
Well, he was putting a sheer amount of money on the table for a known franchise. So I think that was what's interesting. I think for him to have done that for a show that nobody has heard of before, I think is a lot harder. So it'll be interesting to see how he does this with Awesomeness TV. I think he's going to have to start working with people like Traci in order to do that. Okay.
We'll have a word. Right, so that's what you're saying is business models are getting changed, unhinged, just anything goes maybe. So not anything goes. I think there's a lot, for viable properties and for viable producers, I think there's a lot more possible for you to do, okay? So you can think about, I can take a successful franchise from the United States, and I know the woman who does the second screen stuff for this channel, Lisa Shaw for Bravo, and one of the things that she does with shows like The Real Housewives is that she makes sure that she's feeding the audience in between different things that they can watch and snack on. Well, perhaps Bravo can start thinking about selling different things that you can know what's happening with Bethany all through the year until the next Real Housewives. I can't remember which city she's from, but I think she's from New York. But so that you can follow Bethany and you can maybe subscribe to that. Those are different ways that can be done, and I think you can wind up finding interesting business models for things that are known franchises. So maybe spin-offs that have value in themselves,
Yeah.
and they're not sort of afterthoughts.
And have loyal audiences.
Okay, so all of this needs producers to be, and also buyers and sellers to be more flexible. That's your theme, Louisa. Why did you pick this theme?
Because I agree with both Traci and Marianne's what they saw happening at the show. For me, it's the implication of it that's super interesting because, well, as you well know, I'm all about putting people first, to putting the audience in focus, and I think that in order to develop more effective business models for monetizing content, especially across all the different formats, all the different devices, all the different viewing habits, all the different regions, it requires a great deal more flexibility than we've seen up until now. And when I say flexibility, I mean flexibility in format and length of content and what what's allowed to be done with content. For example, you might have a 23-minute episode that you then edit down to a 7-minute episode that still encompasses the whole thing. That's meant for delivery to a different demographic, or maybe somebody who's on the road, or maybe somebody who's on a different device. I don't know. So flexibility in the format of the content, flexibility in the production of the content and how it's put together, flexibility in the distribution of the content in terms of who's allowed to view it when, how often, etc., and flexibility in what people are allowed to do with the content, and flexibility obviously is challenging to existing business models, especially rights models, and one of the biggest. I guess one of the things that I heard the most often was something that this isn't the first time I've heard it, but I heard it quite loudly, especially yesterday, was that rights windows, the way that we're used to windowing content, is hopelessly broken. It doesn't work, and I think that's demonstrably true after the numbers of millions of illegal downloads of Game of Thrones around the world. I think that's probably the best evidence anybody could ever ask for maybe reconsidering the way that we do release windows. Because if you think about all of those people, even if only, let's say, 5% of them had been willing to pay to watch what they downloaded for free, that's a significant loss of income just for not having taken the opportunity. And I think that one way that we can embark on making better business models or better acquisition models, better rights frameworks, is by observing human behavior, and something that one of my panelists said in my panel yesterday is something I wholeheartedly agree with and have done for some time, which is that piracy is actually our friend in this industry. What people do illegally is a really excellent indicator of what they want. We should be watching what people are doing, what people want to do, what people are choosing to do, and letting that lead our business models, letting that become the basis on which we design our business and monetization. Because that's, one, any framework that's based on humans is much more flexible, much more sustainable, much more extensible into the future. And two, that's where the money is. I mean, it's the people who will monetize your content for you, whether they pay for it in cash or watch advertising or give you data. Doesn't really matter what they exchange it for. It's the people that are going to make you money or not. And so I think if we stop thinking about audiences as mysterious, slightly enigmatic potential enemies, and the things that they do, Peter yesterday said pirates are actually just super fans, and he's right. There's super rabid fans who are willing to do anything, even if it's illegal, to get their hands on what they love. If we think about it in those terms, then I think it gives us a lot more freedom to examine new ways of doing business.
So there's for the piracy question, in music, the platforms like Spotify have been credited with taking some oomph away from piracy. Does TV have that yet? Is it?
I think
Netflix,
so. Well,
maybe?
I think the Netflix model is a really good example of. I mean, essentially, one of the behaviors that when I was at BBC, we did a lot of research on illegal downloads and what people were doing, and one of the things we found was that people were binging on series stacks, and so at the BBC, one of the things that they continue to try to do is negotiate the rights to allow people to binge legally on stuff. And I mean, the way that Netflix has released their content and the unbelievable success with which those releases have been met globally, I think is a testament to the fact that people will pay for what makes them happy. I mean, they will pay in whatever way they think is most fair. In some markets, I mean, one of my panelists yesterday was from Turkey, and Turkish people apparently do not like to pay in cash for content, but they have no problem watching ads. So it's a matter of people will exchange something for things that they think are worth it, whether that's cash or eyeballs or time or whatever.
Also, what a number of broadcasters are doing in a number of countries now, Australia is definitely a strong example of this, is that they are insisting that they get the rights to the shows when they are released in the United States. So if you have a Disney output deal and you're showing Scandal on your broadcaster in Australia, it will be day and date with when it's on air in the United States.
We had that in France. The Orange, they got Game of Thrones the last season the day after it was broadcast in the States. I didn't check if that had an impact on piracy. But to your point before, Louisa, the flexibility, I was going to say, has to go both ways. You said flexibility, you need to be able to make 20 minutes, 7 minutes, 3 minutes, but you also need to be able to go the other way and cater for binge viewing, because that's a massive trend.
Yeah, and I think Marianne's point is also a good one about supporting content, because that's always, not always, but it's been around for a while, this idea of supporting content, especially for the really big headlining properties, right, for any broadcaster. BBC's been particularly good about it with Doctor Who stuff. But I think that essentially you can be airing the subtext, you can be airing the stuff that isn't going on in the main episode. So you can actually build a much richer universe around a story. And this is kind of, this is sort of the other side of it, is that storytelling is at the heart of making great content. And it's the stories that people are addicted to. It's the stories that people love and pay for and value and talk about for years to come. And all of the stuff around that, the rest of the industry, has to be about getting the stories to the people who will love them. That's what it has to be about, not trying to prevent the wrong people from getting their hands on the stories. That's just insane. I think it's just a matter of the focus shifting, because getting the stories to the right people does require flexibility, but it also has enormous reward.
That's a perfect transition to Angela's point. That's incredible, Louisa. Which is, Angela, you chose an image from...
How many of you guys watch Orange is the New Black?
Wow. Oh, one.
Oh,
I'm raising 3 kids.
You have to watch it. It
You
is
have to watch
so
it.
good.
It's insane. So Orange is the New Black is, so this is a scene from Orange is the New Black, and just to quickly explain the episode, Orange is the New Black is about a white-collar girl who's fairly young who goes to jail for something that she did 10 years ago. So it's about her time in jail. And in this episode, everyone in the prison, like all of the prison gangs, randomly go on this quest for a chicken that may or may not exist. It's sort of like a magic chicken that might be the most intelligent chicken ever. And they're chasing it for different kinds of reasons. Some think that there's drugs in it. Others think that it holds the power to wisdom. I mean, there are lots of reasons. They're bored. There's nothing else to do in prison. And so the protagonist, like this very well-educated person, she also gets caught up in this chicken chase at the expense of a lot of really important things that are happening in the real world. And at some point, she's chasing the chicken that may or may not exist because she's seen it. And it turns a corner, and she finds that inexplicably, it's on the other side of the fence, which kind of solidifies the fact that the chicken is not real, but her prison is real. She's actually in prison. And that's what this episode is about. And I chose this for
Angela,
two
sorry,
reasons.
if you use your microphone,
Oh, yeah,
maybe
sorry.
people at the back.
I forgot about this. And I chose this for a couple of reasons. One is because I think it's a really good metaphor for where we are as an industry right now. I think we spent a lot of the last few years, especially after the internet exploded, chasing a chicken, saying, okay, how can we get involved in this transmedia thing? It seems like people are into this social thing. But really, we kind of want things to go back to the way they were, because we made piles of money there, and this might eat us. We might lose everybody to lolcats and GIFs. And what we found was that enough time has passed that we're realizing that we have tons of fragmentation. We have way more places where content can be consumed. And what that actually means is that we have a lot more customers for quality content. Customers who are leaving television, in theory, are actually demanding more content that's Game of Thrones quality or Mad Men quality. That's what they want. And So the reason why I chose this was partly because of that, because there's been this enormous shift in perception, I think, in how we're looking at transmedia. I'll explain that in a minute. And I also wanted to talk a little bit about Netflix, because Orange is the New Black is a Netflix original series. The fact that Netflix started going into original series was a really, really scary idea. And what's interesting about this market this week is that talk about Netflix has always been pretty high. Like Netflix is, this streaming threat, this OTT threat. But now we're talking about it in a different way. I used to hear a lot about HBO in kind of this admirable sort of fawning way. Like HBO is this model for perfect content, perfect everything. They make piles of money and they're just so good at everything they do. I heard HBO once this week. Everyone is talking about Netflix. All of a sudden, it's become a legitimate best practice, a very serious potential distribution partner who's profitable for everyone involved, and a very, very interesting content partner. I mean, from Roma Khanna talking about fawning over how much she loves Orange is the New Black and was one of the people who binge-watched it, to Cécile Frot-Coutaz of Fremantle Media saying, we're not afraid of Netflix, we like them as a partner, and we'd like to make content for them. Like, the attitudes toward Netflix has completely changed. And I think it has a lot to do with us realizing that more screens, more fragmentation is not necessarily a bad thing. It leads us to a lot of different kinds of distribution and just opportunities for making money, like you guys were talking about earlier. We're experimenting a lot more with how we can spread our content in interesting ways, direct to series, pilots that you sort of throw onto the internet, see how they fare. One of the things that I think Netflix did really well was that it identified binge watching was not detrimental to television. It actually helps TV. And so that's becoming a model for us. We decided to legitimize that as a model. PwC actually said yesterday, yes, binge watching, it actually drives people to television because once they're caught up, they want to watch it live. They're addicted. It's a good gateway drug, which we would have known if we were following pirates from the very beginning. Because the Pirate Bay and BitTorrent already knew this. We were all binge watching Game of Thrones and Breaking Bad and Walking Dead when they weren't immediately available in our countries, and now we're stuck, and we need to be immediately up to date. And as Peter Blacker noticed, that is something that we're actually willing to pay for. And I really like what he said yesterday. He said we need to find a way now to develop products that don't punish viewers just because they have a certain preference for how they want to consume. And I thought that was great. I thought that it's incredible how everybody's really excited about the opportunities for content now, as well as the opportunities for distribution. I think Carrie of One Entertainment said a really interesting thing, like that just nailed it. It was on a panel about the golden age of storytelling, whether we're in a golden age. And she said, you can't find any good showrunners anymore. You ask for a list, there are going to be like 6 people on that list. They're all working. All the great people in television are working right now because there's so much great content to produce and the demand is so high. So yeah, that was my thing.
It's a big thing. It's a great point. I suppose the overall theme is a shift in perception, which is pretty much summed up by what Peter Blacker was saying. Looking at piracy differently. Look at all this admiration for Netflix, everything they seem to be doing well. Do you think that the industry has sort of made the leap in the right direction?
I think so. I think before there was this sort of cautious attitude about it, like, okay, I don't want to be washed away. Like, how do I nail this? And now there's very much this experimental attitude. You even see it in the fact that DreamWorks purchased Awesomeness TV. It might not be clear to us or even to them exactly why they bought it, but we know the significance of the act. We know that it's that Brian Robbins, who developed it, is a guy who came from our industry, and that he made this jump, which to many seems like a crazy jump, to online. And he made a lot of money, and what he also found was that it's just a more efficient format. You can produce a lot of pilots a lot more quickly for a lot less money and find out way faster if they work. And that's why he found that his model worked. And I think that's at least one part of why DreamWorks decided to make that purchase. Another thing that I noticed was CW, which is sort of like an angsty teen network in the United States. I got a press release from CW saying that they're about to release their own digital channel. So this is something that this is a model that channels are actually trying to adapt on their own. Not even just it's not even just cable networks, it's channels as well. And they're also trying to produce original content for those digital channels. And one of the reasons why that makes sense is because it's a risk that costs a lot less than, for example, launching a new show on television. You can actually experiment a great deal online, and you can, as CW did, sort of take the credit for being innovative with digital, like embracing it. It's a win-win.
Yeah, sorry, I was just going to say that I hope that we've turned the corner. I really hope we've turned the corner. But because the shift that I think maybe that we're all talking about is that, you know, the old school way of thinking about new technology as the broadcasting industry is every new device, every new tech, every new bit of tech was another pipe to push things through, another you know, differently shaped hole to shove the same framework through, and the framework got kind of more and more mangled every time we kept on trying to push it through a new door. And what I hope these things are signs of is that we're starting to think as an industry about what the possibilities are of these new domains, of these new technologies, of these new areas for people to interact in, and start from there. Start, you know, what can we do, not how can we do the same thing with this.
Yeah.
But I want to build on a point that you brought up earlier about the consumer and your point about how these digital platforms are experimental and help develop what should be the longer form shows. What's interesting about a lot of these new things that are happening, and we can point to Netflix, which they came up with House of Cards by doing data analysis that a large percentage of their viewers liked Kevin Spacey. They also liked watching British dramas. And the British version of House of Cards actually got a lot of Americans watching it. So what is happening is that the technology before was looked at as a distribution pipeline. Now it is actually being looked at as a data feeder. And it's becoming an avenue for creatives to actually understand what their audiences want, need, desire. And hopefully, ultimately, this big pilot infrastructure where it's, you know, there's a group of how many people that make those decisions in Hollywood on an annual basis, you know, that think they know what people are thinking, that actually the people the audience will actually become a partner with creatives in developing new programming franchises. And that is truly exciting.
Hallelujah to that.
And that was Kevin Spacey's point in his speech at the Edinburgh TV Festival. He was saying that because Netflix can run that data, they knew that House of Cards would work, and therefore they didn't need to do a pilot, which they weren't prepared to do anyway.
There's also there was another point to his talk, because I loved that's probably my favorite talk I've seen all year. But there was another point to it as well, which is something that we were talking about in the earlier, is the trust for the creative, right? So instead of I feel like that's something that's also that Netflix has shifted along a bit, and it's definitely what Kevin Spacey was talking about in his talk, was that, you know, not only were they fairly certain it was going to work because of previous viewing habits, etc., but they really trusted the creative team to get on with it, instead of, you know, bogging them down in loads of hoops to jump through and approvals. They just let them get on with making the content, and that also made it better. And I think that needs to happen much more as well. I think that instead of it being a matter of, oh, but what if it's the wrong thing, this kind of risk aversion, the matter of trust in the storytelling community, trust in the content creators to be able to make things that are relevant and that are beloved to the public, and then giving the public access to be able to cast their own vote is really a critical component of this.
That's what's exciting for us as a content creator. The only problem is that we're finding is that we can do all these amazing things, but we're not getting paid as much money because it's tinier and littler. So you might have to work harder and do more of these little pilot things with sweat equity than with getting paid.
Yeah, it's getting to be a lot more like the tech world.
Yeah, it's hard.
Yeah, that was exactly what I was thinking of when we started talking about YouTube. Just before we came down here to Cannes, the sort of the enthusiasm about YouTube channels, about multi-channel networks, MCN started to sort of it was as if that bubble started to burst a bit. You started seeing articles about some of the MCNs are having trouble. Some people aren't happy that YouTube keeps 40% of the ad revenues. I mean, compared, I think iTunes is sort of 25 or something. Is it difficult as a creative to determine what's the right level of investment of your time to put into exploring all these new platforms?
And it just goes back to being an entrepreneur, where now before, it just felt like I could just work on my show and concentrate on that. But now I feel really like a farmer and planting all these little seeds, and I just feel like, I'm just taking these opportunities and just making them happen and just seeing which one grows, and then hopefully we'll go to that. But it is. And raising 3 kids, it's hard.
No, there was...
I'm exhausted.
I'm just sitting here going, welcome to startup world, man.
That's true.
This is the story I hear
trying to be
every day in
positive.
London.
Trying to be positive.
But there was a guy earlier this week who was saying, I wish I could remember his name because I feel like it's significant. But he was talking about how we're moving away from competition, and we have to integrate ourselves into a world of co-opetition because standards for the quality of our production are getting higher, the quality of our work are getting higher, but the budgets are getting lower. Yeah. They're saying do it faster and do it for a lot less money, which, is something that the startup world is very familiar with. They're unsustainable constraints. So one thing that was interesting that PwC brought up was that there are a lot of people who want to get into this game. You have cable companies who want in. You have your standard, you have your distributors and your producers, but you also have brands, you have new labels that are trying to get out. You have so many actors who are interested in getting involved into whatever projects that you're trying to mount. So there are a lot of ways that you can I think partner intelligently and collaborate with people that you once thought were competitors in order to produce something that's innovative, that's of good quality, and that will actually make everyone money at the end of the day, which is why we're having these conversations about, well, what can we do about distribution? And changing an existing distribution model is really hard. When I was in college, there was this woman who said, this crazy new TV thing is amazing. I think I want to use TV to show other women how to cook. And everybody was like, that's insane. Nobody will watch that. And at the time, when TV came out, what people were using television for was broadcasting radio broadcasters. They just shot radio broadcasters sitting there talking on the radio because they couldn't think what else to do. And now when you think of all of the channels devoted to food alone, totally missed opportunity. And everybody thought she was crazy. She probably thought she was crazy.
So we're only at the beginning of making the right sort of content for all these new platforms.
Yeah.
Every new medium will show you. It takes time for us to explore it and work out what it's uniquely great at. Yeah. And I mean that's who was talking about this. It might have been, I can't remember who was talking about this really recently. It was about the fallacy of the replacement of one media by another. Was that Katzenberg yesterday? I can't remember. But there's this. Every medium, as soon as there's a new one, as soon as there's a new player in the scene, they get terrified of like, oh, they're going to steal all my stuff, cannibalization, etc. But it's not. I mean, if you look at consumption, everything's rising. People are watching more telly and using more internet, and it's like
reading more.
Well, exactly, and it's just we're doing all this stuff at once. I mean, maybe we're not paying full attention to everything anymore. That's a different question. But the point isn't that every medium replaces something else. Radio is still going strong. It's that every medium brings something new to it, and to some degree retroactively reshapes the old media, and it takes a while to discover what it's uniquely good at. We're still working.
Isn't all of this new stuff, though, a bit possibly a bit overhyped by people like us. The PwC, one figure that was really surprising that PwC came out with yesterday was that only 4% of people watch TV shows based on social media buzz.
Absolutely, but they also said, pay attention to this figure. 59% of people will watch a TV show based on the recommendation of family or friends. Who are you following on social media?
Bingo.
Who do you trust?
That's exactly it. I mean, there's still this, and we were talking about it in my panel yesterday, was that somehow there's this idea that social media is something that's different from people talking to each other, when that's actually what social media is a tool for. So I'm not really, I mean, if there are people who are saying, no, I don't get any TV recommendations from social media, but they're using Facebook, I guarantee they're getting some of their idea of what they're watching through those media, right? It might not be a conscious choice that they are researching their programs in these worlds, but social media isn't a thing, actually. It's just a tool for people to talk to each other. It's a tool for people to do what they already do. Instead of doing it in a room around a water cooler, people do it in the public domain on Twitter.
Right, and 40 to 50% of the people watching any kind of television are usually watching with this or with that, and
with the same thing they tweet with.
Right, exactly. And Dan Rose had some very interesting statistics the other day. I'm sure you were there at that event, as it relates to what the participation in social media is during different shows, like during the VMAs recently when Miley Cyrus was twerking. 90% of the audience was on Facebook communicating about it. So social media is definitely a big part of the water cooler. It may not necessarily be why people are watching shows, but the reality is it's playing a part in the conversation about shows.
And it's certainly a way that people are learning about shows, whether that's conscious or not. I mean, that's the thing is, again, I sometimes have difficulty with some of this research, because a lot of this, I mean, I come from design, and a lot of our challenge is always to try to work out not just what people are doing, but why they're doing it, which is a very complex set of questions. I mean, if you think about the thousands of tiny little decisions that each of us makes every day, you know, when to walk out into the street, whether or not I like a person on site, we're not even aware of why we're making these decisions most of the time. So, you know, any kind of survey that asks people, give me one yes or no answer of how you decide what programming to consume, I'm not sure that we can, as humans, like accurately say that. The thing is that we're immersed in conversation all the time, and social media is part of that immersion.
Yeah. And in terms of television, you also have to look at, because live TV is one thing, right? People love talking about live TV. There's this whole community experience that happens, particularly on social media, around live TV. But in terms of scripted television or films, when you look at the way people communicate on social media in that regard, what you're finding is they're actually trying to find ways to extend the experience of their show. They're literally trying to live inside their show when they're not watching it. One of the big reasons why I started watching Game of Thrones, because there are a lot of things fighting for your time. I didn't want to watch Game of Thrones because I had this very strong suspicion that it was going to suck me in and eat my life. So I fought it for a very long time. And but the thing that was really hard about fighting it was that I kept being attacked on the internet with memes, these damn memes that my friends were always sharing. Like, they were pinning them, and then they were all over Facebook, and then they were matching them up with other shows. Like, memorably, somebody juxtaposed a picture of Luke and Leah to a picture of the Lannister twins. And the Luke and Leah picture said something like, looking for love in all the wrong places. And the Lannister twins said, or are they? And it was just like, you see jokes like that and you're just like, God, I have to watch this. I don't even know what it is, but I feel like I have to, because I'm being left out of something that will clearly enrich my life once I'm in on the show.
It's peer pressure, plain and simple.
Yeah.
It's just medium.
They're also competitively producing content around our content. And that's insane. They're trying to, there's peer pressure. There's also the fact that they're trying to legitimize what they're doing and add something new to the conversation. They're trying to look clever. Sharing a meme that you think is funny is a really easy way to look clever to people that you respect and that you like. Peer pressure, going back to peer pressure. And it's also, again, they're competitively producing around our content. All of that work that's happening around Game of Thrones, I mean, it's incredible. It's.
And I suppose that could be my last question to you all. Does that I think we've rarely seen people get so worked up about content like Game of Thrones, like House of Cards, like Orange is the New Black.
At least not about as much different content all at once. I mean,
there's that as well. But does this play to this notion of this golden age of TV? I'd like to ask you all, but before we go to questions, if you agree that this is a golden age for TV in terms of the quality of content, yes or no, Angelo?
Oh, definitely. We've got 10 times more stories to live in, and the scary thing about humans is we're addicted to stories. The more that you give us, the more that we want. Like we were talking about earlier, it's an enormous opportunity, and you can see that. The fact that all of the actors are like, films, meh, but TV and internet, yes, let's go.
Yeah.
It's
Been
enormous.
hearing that all week, yeah.
Absolutely, and that makes me happy. I mean, Joseph Campbell, one of my great idols, said, stories are how we as humans deal with the fact that we're going to die someday. Stories are the little bit of immortality that we make that lives on after we die. And I think that the more we as an industry can focus on how we make more great stories and reach more people with stories, and the less we focus on prevention this, can't do that, the better off the industry is at large. And the reality is the technology gives us the capability to deliver so much more than we ever could before to so many more different people on so many more different levels and engage.
I'm not the creative up here, I'm the business person, but I will tell you that I think that it is the golden age of television, just in terms of everything that I wind up consuming and viewing on a regular basis, and also just the patterns that I find myself personally experiencing as a result of getting hooked on a particular television show. For example, we were talking about Orange is the New Black. I was so, after I binged on it, I was so missing it that I immediately downloaded the book, just because I really need to know what the true story is of Piper, and just so I can keep it in my mind until the next season shows on it. So I think it's definitely living in all of us, and I think all of us culturally, just in terms of how we wind up talking with all of our friends and how we socialize with people, that becomes a huge part of the conversation. And it's also reflective of the fact that 30% of the traffic on Twitter is about television shows. So it tells us that people are very much involved in what they are watching and consuming. And that means it's good.
Do you think, Traci, people have never been so passionate about TV? Or is that going too far?
No. I think so. And actually in the children's television arena, I think there's so much out there for specific curriculum, and also not even in quality children's shows that producers and networks are putting out, but even using YouTube as an educational, my son loves trains, and just we can watch the trains in Europe and Africa and, and globally, just sort of see what's going on, and watching these videos is just incredible.
So does the bar of quality being raised apply to kids' TV as well, from your point of view?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Again, you need to figure out how to differentiate yourself from the static that's out there. But because there's so much good quality stuff of what is going to make you feel different. And again, it still comes to connecting those characters and stories, for sure.
I actually believe that one of the biggest threats to pay television subscriptions on a longer-term basis is what is happening with kids programming on alternative platforms. Certainly in the United States, it was controlled by 3 channels for a very long period of time, and it almost became impossible if you were creative in children to be able to get through unless you were one of the blessed at Nickelodeon or Disney Channel. And I think right now you're opening up the doors to a lot of very interesting things, and then people like yourself who are blessed at Nickelodeon or anointed there, you're now able to go and do a lot of things that they would not let you do.
Right, and own the IP.
Right, and own the IP. So I think it's going to be very, very interesting to see what happens to children's television over the next 5 to 10 years and how that affects the overall TV ecosystem, because that's when you start developing your TV consumer. I mean, that is the beginning phase, and the behavior patterns that they'll develop are going to be very telling longer term.
May I say one more thing?
Yeah, I'd just like to leave 5 minutes at the end for questions, but yeah.
Okay. I think it also mentioned saying, when I went to college, I mean, we had the internet already, so I lived a pretty long time without a television, and for a while that was okay. And but the thing is, once you're in the internet world and involved in social media and all of that stuff, like once it takes you, and it will, because that's just where people are going now, you find that it's a very demanding universe. It takes all of your attention. You have to multitask all the time. And what I've found several times in my life already, because it's been a few years since I've left college, is that every time I move, I live for a while without a television, and then at some point it's like, oh, screw it, I have to. And I end up buying a television. We just bought this enormous smart TV. Our only requirement was that we be able to plug our computers in. But there's something to be said for the quality of the passive experience of television. It's not work. You can just let yourself go. The only complaint we really have about our televisions now is that there's this sort of dissatisfaction now about channel surfing. We want to just be able to find only things that we like when we turn the TV on, which is why we plug our computers in. But otherwise, the experience, we've always liked that. The fact that we could just zone out, it wants nothing from us, and we can get lost in this place. It's always been amazing, and there will always be a market for that as well.
Great. I would like to leave time if anyone out there wants to ask any questions. Yep.
Yeah, hi. I apologize. First of all, I came a little bit late, so if this is an irrelevant question, but it's a question I've wanted to ask all week. If this is actually a golden age of TV, when did it start? Where were those key pieces of television content that went, wow, this is new now? Anyone?
I mean, I'm sure we'll all have different answers to this question, but I think the reason why the golden age is happening is there's this sort of magical, perfect storm going on where you've got more options for getting content to people than you ever have before. More different devices, more access to the internet, more people on the internet, more than ever before. 2, you've got more players who are brave enough to fund good content than arguably you ever have before. And 3, you've got more ways of hearing about how much people love the content than arguably you've ever had before. And so these 3 things together happening at the same time, and then then stuff like House of Cards, Orange is the New Black has kind of shown, and it works. You can make money off it.
Sorry, I think the question was more, when did it start, not why did it start?
It happened in the 90s. It happened in the 90s. And
Sopranos, sure.
Well, it's not just it's not just The Sopranos. It was also what happened with feature films, because what happened is that feature films became very addicted to catering to 12 to 24-year-old young men, okay? And quality stories began getting squeezed out at the box office. And places like HBO that were not regulated by network television could break boundaries. You could say curse words, you could have sex scenes, you could have all those great stories that people had gotten addicted to on television, where now, well, in the movie theaters, you didn't have to go to the movie theaters. And by the way, the movie theaters were getting more and more expensive. So people were able to watch high quality television. And then another seminal event happened. FX produced The Shield. And so Peter Liguori pushed Peter Turner, I was at Fox at that time, to get him to okay The Shield. And then it showed that basic cable channels could produce HBO-like programming. That, I think, is the turning point.
AMC Mad Men was pretty epic, too. When they finally got Mad Men, it was just like, AMC, really?
Yeah, but The Shield preceded Mad Men, and that all happened in the late 90s in the United States.
I think you're ignoring Westwood
Yes, you're right. I agree. I agree. West Wing. That's a very good point. Yeah.
Yeah.
Traci, when did you think?
Oh, I was going to say Lost, but now that you said Sopranos, I think Sopranos.
Okay, Angela.
What?
Which show did it start with for you?
No, I totally agree with the HBO thing. I remember that that when Sex and the City came out, all the buzz around that was the first time that I was like, I need to get cable. And then little by little, you started to see this trickle effect of, you know, that all of a sudden there's quality television on these channels that you never ever watch ever. And it's like, why? When did that happen? Why? So, yeah, I'm inclined to agree. The '90s, though, oh, yeah, the '90s.
But the feature film industry also let down the audience.
Yeah. So it was a long time coming.
And they're still doing it now. I mean, it's only superhero movies at the moment. I can't remember the last time I was wowed in a cinema.
The Avengers.
Well, okay, except
I like Blue Jasmine.
yeah.
Really?
Well, that's not.
There's some
Any other
interesting stuff
questions?
going on.
Sorry.
Yes.
Sorry, it was actually a statement. Getting back to Breaking Bad, there's been a perfect storm since this came out, but I think a lot of people missed part of the point last night. He actually also said it was, quote, a bad idea, unquote. Only in the context that, spoiler alert, that the way the series ended was why they couldn't do the deal.
Yeah.
Because there was no way there'd be continuity. And apparently, I haven't been able to track it down, but I'm told there's been a Twitter debate today from some of the creators where they actually mulled whether they could bring certain parties back to life so they could do the deal, but decided it was too impossible. I think the other point he made too, which I think you may have raised, but I came in a little bit late, was, and I quoted in my piece today, I'm just trying to find it now, despite the deal not happening, he predicted that the model for high-caliber, short-form content delivered online would play a key part in the future of TV.
Yeah, that's the point. It doesn't really matter that it didn't.
Exactly. And I think what's amazing about the Katzenberg thing is it's a perfect distillation of what we're talking about. It's guys like Katzenberg going, okay, let's fool around with this because actually, yeah, gateway drug. People are addicted to Breaking Bad. And it's also an illustration of how high the bar for content quality has gotten. You actually have writers, the makers of Breaking Bad going, like we made our masterpiece, it's done now, sorry. Like it doesn't matter how much you pay us. And I think that means something.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, well, if that's it, thank you very much for coming along. Thank you to all of our speakers for agreeing to join us today. Hope you can all get back home all right. Fingers crossed it's looking okay from an airport point of view. Thank you for coming along. Thank you for coming to Mipcom. And be sure to check out all our live blogs, conference videos, etc. on mipblog.com, both now and all year round. Thank you very much.